"My mom takes up too much space," Daniel said to his wife in the kitchen, loud enough for the words to travel through the door and sit beside me on the cold concrete. 2 days later, my bed was wedged between the lawnmower and the recycling bin, a lamp plugged into an orange extension cord, the garage door draft sliding around my ankles at night. He'd shifted me like a box. Out of the way. Out of mind. I wasn't clutter. I wasn't done. He thought I'd fold myself small and stay put. But while he measured rooms with a tape, I was already measuring time, patience, and paper, the kind that turns a house back into a home and a mother back into the center. If you like stories like this, please subscribe, like an open notification bell for more real-life grandma stories. Daniel was my only child, born on a night so cold the hospital windows wore lace. I raised him with hands that learned every job a house can ask for. I cleaned offices before dawn, kept books at the hardware store at night, and stretched soup across a week when money said it couldn't be done. When his father died, I fixed the sink in the silence, and I learned to sleep with the porch light on until Daniel came home safe. He grew tall and fast and restless, the kind of boy who turned chairs into ladders and ladders into lookout towers. I bought him cleats when the rent was late, sold my wedding set to pay for his graduation suit, and never kept a ledger. I thought love added up on its own. When Daniel and his wife Kira found a bigger house across town, I sold my little bungalow and sent most of the money for their down payment. "Family house," he said, kissing my cheek. "We'll build memories here." I moved in to help with the girls while they worked shifts that never lined up. I cooked, folded, and learned the new house's heartbeat. The heater's click, the creak on the third stair, the way the back door sighed in summer. I took the smallest bedroom and made it sweet. My sewing machine under the window, a basket of storybooks by the bed, peppermint creams for rewards when the girls sounded out tricky words. I paid the taxes early, filed receipts in labeled envelopes, and kept the thermostat just right. When Kira's mother got sick, she flew home for weeks. I slept on the sofa with the baby monitor on my chest. Daniel called me a saint and posted photos of my wool socks beside the bassinet. I thought love would come back shaped like chairs pulled out for me and doors held open. Instead, one afternoon he said I took up too much space. A week later, my pillow knew concrete. The first nudge wore a friendly smile. A contractor came to measure a future office. Daniel waved a hand toward my room. "We'll park Mom's sewing stuff in the garage for now. Clear the spare room." For now is a gentle lie people tell when the box is already labeled. Kira started a minimalist kick. "Flat surfaces are for breathing," she said, sweeping my cookbook stand into a bin. "Pick 2 to keep." I kept Nana's biscuit book and the one with butter stains the girls loved to trace with their fingers. The family calendar left the fridge and slid into Daniel's phone. He forgot my doctor appointment, then said, "Text me next time." The next time he was in a meeting, and I chewed peppermint creams in a waiting room that smelled like lemon and old magazines. Mail changed its address without moving. Statements arrived with his name, not mine. "Just streamlining," he said, tossing envelopes on the counter. The mug I used every morning disappeared into a donate box. My slippers wandered to a shelf above the drill bits like they were equipment. The spare room got a new name long before it got a desk. "Office," they said, walking past an empty rectangle of carpet. My sewing machine went to the garage under a tarp like a sleeping animal. "We'll run a rug out there," Daniel said cheerfully. "It's not like we use this space much." He started asking me to corral my things. He nudged my mending basket with his foot. He called my jar of buttons visual noise. He asked if I could keep my corner neat, as if corners were where a mother belonged. Then came the move. He carried my bed to the garage with a neighbor, set it tight to the wall, and ran an extension cord along the ceiling hooks. The garage door sucked breath every time a car passed. Cold crept slow and sure. "Cozy," he announced. "Temporary. We need to use the rooms more efficiently." People walked through at Kira's birthday party and admired the office, which was still a promise. Daniel opened the interior door to the garage for his tour group and laughed. "Mom likes it cool." They laughed with him. It was the kind of laugh that sticks to paint and becomes part of the color. I tucked the girls in that night, read 2 stories, and washed my single mug by hand because the dishwasher sounded like a closing date. I lay on the garage bed under 2 quilts, listening to the refrigerator pop and the motion light click. It wasn't the cold that bit deepest. It was the way he had turned my presence into a footprint he could sweep. But I knew something Daniel didn't. Houses remember who keeps them. And paper remembers too. It landed in the middle of Kira's celebration. The house was full of beautiful home, and you've done so much. Daniel led a tour like a realtor. Office, he said, opening the door to the empty room with good light. Still getting set up. He stopped by the interior garage door, grinning. And this is Mom's spot for now. She likes it quiet. Laughter skimmed the surface. Someone suggested shelves along that wall. Daniel nodded as if he were discussing storage, not his mother's bed. He didn't look at me. He looked at the square footage. I stood at the sink with a stack of plates and watched him point at my life like it was a bin to label. Not the cold, not the tarp, not the extension cord. The tour that erased me. I dried my hands, went to the garage and sat on the edge of the bed. Concrete holds its own weather and it has no mercy. I breathed until my ribs stopped arguing. Fine, I thought. If he wants to draw lines on a floor plan, I'll redraw them on paper he can't ignore. I lit candles on Kira's cake and sang. I smiled in photos. Then I washed the last dish, folded the towel into a neat square, and felt something inside me go from soft to steel. I made a list. Every dollar I'd poured into this roof. The down payment transfer from selling my bungalow. Tax receipts paid early. Grocery runs when paychecks didn't meet. The text where Daniel wrote, "It's your house too, Mom." Dates. Names. Photos. I slid it all into a folder labeled space. I went to the community center and asked for legal 8 hours. Amal, a young attorney with ink on his fingers and a careful voice, asked questions that didn't hurt. Are you on title? Yes. Do you contribute to household expenses? Yes. Have they restricted your access to common areas? My bed is in the garage. He nodded. You have co-occupancy rights. We can file a temporary order to prevent interference. We can petition if we must. But first, paper and presents. Reclaim rooms. Document everything. I called City Hall about a home occupation permit for domestic needlework and tutoring. The clerk said I needed a small license, a fire extinguisher, and a letter from a co-owner acknowledging the use. Daniel loves email. That part would be easy. I messaged the church quilting circle and the school reading tutor. Thinking of starting a free Tuesday mending table and Friday reading hour. My place. Hearts came back like birds. I bought a whiteboard and magnets shaped like strawberries. I wrote house schedule at the top and left the rest empty. I set it on the fridge where the calendar used to live. Then I made tea, wiped the counters and waited for Monday. I filled the whiteboard before sunrise. Monday 6 to 8 p.m. Sewing for beginners, living room. Tuesday 4 to 6 p.m. Homework club, dining room. Wednesday 7 to 8 a.m. Stretch and tea den. Thursday 5 to 7 p.m. Supper swap prep, kitchen. Friday 3 to 5 p.m. Reading hour, den. Saturday 10 to 12. Fix-it table, garage/driveway. Sunday 2 to 4 p.m. Quiet room office. Underneath I added, all welcome. Respect the space. Clean as you go. Daniel opened the fridge that evening and froze like he'd found a bill he didn't expect. What is this? Community, I said, stirring soup. Presents. Paper says I can use the home for lawful purposes. I'm using it. We didn't agree. We co-own, I answered. You moved my bed. I'm moving the rest of me back in. Kira hovered at the doorway, unsure which way the wind blew. It's just, we like simple nights. So do I said. Sewing is quiet. Reading is quiet. Stretching is quiet. Supper swap will put labeled meals in the freezer. Simpler than takeout and cheaper too. He stared, weighed the trouble of saying no against the cost of watching. 1 week, he said. 1 week, I agreed. Monday at 6 for women from church and 2 teen girls showed up with fabric and shy smiles. We moved the coffee table, set up 2 machines and stitched hems that had waited months. The living room hummed. Kira brought a plate of sliced apples and stayed. Daniel kept a show low in the bedroom and listened from a distance. At 8 we vacuumed and put the room back as we found it. I left a tiny bouquet of thread spools in a bowl. Kira laughed in spite of herself. Tuesday kids shuffled in with backpacks and pencils chewed to brave nubs. We spread worksheets on the dining table. When one boy wrestled elephant into 3 strong parts and grinned at his own mouth, Daniel walked past on the way to the fridge, slowed and poured water without a sound. Hi, Mr. Daniel, a girl said, not looking up. He lifted a hand. It was enough. Wednesday, 7 neighbors rolled their ankles and shoulders in the den while a kettle whispered in the kitchen. Kira joined in socks and sighed when her back cracked. I needed that, she admitted, surprised by her own body. Thursday, supper swap took over the counters. Tubs labeled with tape slid into the freezer. The girls stuck stickers that said soup lasagna casserole with block letters that made me want to cry. Daniel came home late, saw organized abundance and said only, huh. Friday we made a nest of pillows and a big quilt in the den. 10 small bodies climbed into stories like boats. If joy takes up space, then joy paid rent that day. Saturday brought the first near miss. The HOA president, a man who loves rules more than people, slowed at the curb when he saw the fix-it table in the driveway. We were sharpening knives, oiling a squeaky hinge and giving a kid's bike a new chain. He rolled down his window. This isn't a commercial event, is it? No sales, I said. Repairs. I have the home occupation permit and the code section if you want to see it. No signage, no cash. Just neighbors fixing what they can. He blinked, decided the paperwork in his head weighed too much and muttered, carry on. Daniel watched from the porch. You always did your homework, he said. That's how beams stay up, I answered. By Sunday the office door had a paper sign. Quiet room. No electronics. Read, pray, breathe. I sat inside for 20 minutes with the door open, not to claim the space, but to teach the house how to be still again. At week's end, Daniel tried to negotiate. This is a lot. It's a lot of good, I said. If you're afraid of losing space, say that. But don't confuse emptiness with peace. He looked past me into the den where the girls were reading like cats in a sun patch. One more week, he said softer. Week 2 I moved like water and paper moved with me. I rolled my sewing machine back inside on a small cart and parked it in the dining room corner. A handwritten tag read, Need a hem? Ask Nana. Neighbors left pants on the bench. I returned every pair folded with a clothespin and a note. One of Daniel's co-workers arrived sheepish with a lost button on Monday. He left smiling. I added a bulletin board in the hallway and a shoe shelf below it. Borrow a book sat on top. Paperbacks that didn't mind traveling. The girls tucked their library cards into a jar by the door like little passports. I turned laundry into a lesson. We read care labels together. We shook shirts before they wrinkled and taught the small bodies where their socks lived. Kira cried quiet tears at the dryer because teaching children to carry themselves is love with no spotlight. The second near miss was pettier. Daniel changed the Wi-Fi password on a Wednesday and forgot to update the magnet. Homework club stalled. I tethered my phone, kept reading, and slid a copy of our co-ownership agreement under his door with the paragraph highlighted. Essential services shall not be withheld by either party to the detriment of reasonable use. The magnet returned to its place the next morning. No note. No argument. By month's end, each room had a new muscle. The living room could welcome and then become itself again. The dining room could host work and turn back into a table. The den could wake and wind down. The kitchen could feed more than mouths. The hallway could organize a small town. Even the garage, my old exile, had purpose. A bright pegboard labeled bins, a bench that made broken things leave better. I filed the temporary order Amal drafted, not to fight but to shield. No interference stamped clean and final. Paper behind presence, bone behind skin. We sat with a mediator whose office smelled like old books. You moved her to the garage, she told Daniel, voice even. She moved herself back into the home. The law supports her. Cooperate or litigate. Cooperation is cheaper and less humiliating. Daniel stared at his hands. I didn't think it would take over. It didn't, I said. It filled what you left empty. He didn't answer, but he didn't say stop. I moved my bed back into a bedroom the week the order posted. No speech. No ceremony. I folded the garage corner into a workshop and left the door ajar. On Saturdays, the fix-it table line reached the sidewalk. The HO president brought a lamp with a fussy switch and left with thanks he didn't know how to say. We wrote a simple co-occupancy agreement on one page in plain words. Bedrooms are private. Shared spaces are scheduled, not seized. No moving each other's belongings. Garage is a workshop on Saturdays. Kitchen is for feeding more than your own mouth. We signed. Daniel signed last. He looked at the line and then at me, and for the first time in months he looked like a boy who had been taught better and remembered. He slipped once badly. A neighbor complained about Friday foot traffic and Daniel, tired and thin with work, called the police. When the officers came, I met them with my permit in a clear sleeve, our order, the schedule. One saw the reading quilt and smiled. My grandma does this too, he said. Best part of the week. They left. Daniel stood in the doorway, red-faced. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed yourself, I said soft. You also scared children who came here to read. He walked into the den, cleared his throat, and apologized to small faces that didn't need his pride, only his promise. Relief took up a lot of space. Pride took up less after that. Here came. We turned the living room into coat day. Sizes on a rack, mittens clipped in pairs. Daniel carried the rack from the car without a word. He started showing up to stretch and tea when his back hurt, and once made the kettle whistle before I asked. No speech. No applause. Just presence. The office, long imaginary, became a map room for numbers. I framed my tiny permit and wrote mending and math on an index card taped inside the door. Tuesdays, I hemmed for free and helped a pair of teenagers with algebra in exchange for them carrying Mrs. Hahn's boxes. Daniel brought a shoebox of receipts to my table and said, not quite meeting my eyes, "Can you help?" We found 3 deductions, 2 mistakes, and 1 kind of piece. When Amal emailed, status hearing 2 weeks. Judge wants an update, we went together. We told the truth. The house was calmer. The schedule held. The rooms had jobs. The judge asked if I wanted a recorded life estate, the right to occupy the property for life. Yes, I said, and Daniel nodded. The clerk stamped the page. The sound traveled up my arms like heat. I didn't take a victory lap. I made soup and labeled it with the girls, and when Kira came home from the Saturday market with 2 empty coolers and red cheeks, we danced in socks in the kitchen. Daniel measured a shelf twice, cut once, and sanded until no sock would snag. He stopped saying mine and started saying ours in a voice that fit. I had taken back every room he had, not by shouting or stacking boxes, but by assigning each square foot to the work of care. The house learned our names again. And Daniel slowly learned to make space on purpose. He said I took up too much space. So I learned how to hold space the way carpenters hold a level. Steady, patient, unarguable. Until the whole house settled around the truth. It didn't come as a fight. Came as small, lawful weights set in the right places. The judge's stamp on my life estate recorded more than a right to a room. It recorded a rhythm. I kept time. I began with the whiteboard and the doors. The board stayed on the fridge with the week laid out like calm weather. I added a simple rule in black marker. No events added inside of 48 hours unless all co-owners agree. I hung a second copy of that rule by the inside of each door. Front, back, garage. When Daniel reached for a knob, he brushed the rule with his knuckles. Repetition is a kind of beam. He tried a test 2 Saturdays later. Guys are coming over at 6 to watch the game, he said at breakfast. I pointed at the board. Fix it table 10-12. Coat day 1 to 4. Quiet room 4 to 6. I turned the marker in my hand. Game can start at 8. We'll be done by then. Or take it to Tom's. He puffed up, then saw the girls underlining reading hour with their fingers and Kira portioning soup into labeled tubs. He let the air out. 8, he said. At 8 the doorbell rang. His friend stepped into a clean living room and a steady kitchen and a house that didn't have to pretend it was bigger than it was to feel large. One of them whispered, "It smells like real food in here." Another said, "Your mom fixed the chain on my kid's bike this morning." They shook my hand. They wiped their shoes. They watched in voices that knew where they were. The house kept telling him every day in 100 small ways. This is how space works when care runs it. I made a binder. Not to brag. To keep the bones straight. House charter sat on the cover in bold, with tabs inside for schedule, permits, orders, contacts, keys, repairs, photos. I tucked the co-occupancy agreement behind the first tab and the life estate copy behind the second. I slid in a simple list under keys. All locks keyed alike. 2 keys for each adult. No locks on interior doors except bathrooms and bedrooms. Control hides and locks. I don't allow it to hide. Daniel opened the binder the first time like it might bite him. He read the repairs page and stopped at the line where I'd written, "Kitchen outlet sparks when toaster and kettle run together. Electrician coming Thursday." He said, "I noticed that," in a voice that sounded almost like a thank you and almost like a question. I nodded. "You can meet him if you like." He did. He asked a good question. Why does this keep tripping? The electrician pointed to the breaker and talked about load. Daniel listened. He stood with one hand on the door frame, eyes on the panel, learning that too much on one line is how houses and people both go dark. On the last Saturday of the month, our fix-it line reached the sidewalk and took a left. The HO president showed up with a lamp that blinked when it was tired and a bag of guilt. He handed the lamp to me and said, "If this is against the rules, I never read the rules right." I handed him a form to hold while I tightened a socket. "A lot of rules were written to stop parties," I said. "This isn't a party. This is a neighbor problem." He nodded, relieved to be told he wasn't the bad guy in his own house. I filed our nonprofit registration a week later. I called it the House Commons and kept it small on purpose. A neighborhood program under a church umbrella with liability insurance and a bank account that could take a 20 without anyone getting weird about it. A simple charter. Fix, feed, read. Amal looked it over and smiled. "You're making it permanent," he said. "Good. Permanent doesn't have to be loud. It can be a short letter from an insurance agent, a tax ID in a manila folder, a line in the budget that says flour, thread, bulbs." Kira took the food handler class and passed without blinking. She brought home a certificate that looked like a diploma and taped it to the inside of the pantry door. "I didn't think I could do paperwork," she said, touching the edge with her finger. I said, "You can do anything that feeds people," and meant it. Daniel found a place for his game nights, Tom's garage with a space heater and camp chairs, and started coming home before midnight because our house woke early and he didn't like the feeling of walking into rhythms he didn't help set. He asked me one Tuesday, "Do you need anything printed?" and fixed our long crooked printer tray without trying to show off. He began to put tools back on the pegboard in their exact outlines. He stopped calling my jars of buttons visual noise, and started mending loose coat buttons with my smallest needle because the girls liked seeing him thread it. I didn't touch his bedroom. I didn't push into their bath. Bedrooms are private. But privacy is not a reason to shrink the rest of me. I took the other rooms in the only way that lasts. I gave them jobs. A room with a job is a room I can claim long after anger has cooled. I took the living room with story Saturdays. We lit a lamp. We stacked blankets. We read to toddlers, then to teenagers, then to a circle of adults who brought pages they wrote at night so their houses would hear them. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch with a mug and listened to Mrs. Hahn read about the day she came to this country with a suitcase and a recipe card. I watched him put his hand flat on the cushion beside him like a man who had been falling and had found something that would hold. I took the dining room with homework club and with taxes in February because numbers are also a way to make a house honest. Daniel brought his W-2 in a plain envelope and sat at my table while I helped him list deductions. He asked questions without getting mad at not knowing. He said, "You're good at this, like a fact, not a gift." I replied, "So are you when you show up," and watched the truth settle down on his shoulders in a weight he could finally carry. I took the den with stretch and tea and a paper calendar heavy with ink. We wrote band concert and parent-teacher and Tyler's job interview and inspection day for Kira's empanadas. When Daniel tried to write poker in the Friday square, the girls squealed, "Reading hour." He laughed, erased, and moved poker to the corner in tiny letters. Choosing to be small on purpose is a skill. He learned it in the den with the girls' hands near his. I took the hallway with a borrow a bookshelf. I wrote "Take one. Leave one. Bring it back when you're done" on a card and taped it above the spines. Daniel added a small level to the shelf bracket because one side sagged a hair. He measured twice. He smiled at the bubble when it landed in the center. I took the laundry room with small lessons that look like chores and feel like pride. The girls learned labels. Kira learned she didn't have to do it all at once. Daniel learned you hardly ever need to run the dryer twice if you shake the clothes hard first. He stopped pretending he didn't know how to fold a shirt. He started teaching his older one how to fold her own. He didn't realize I saw. I did. I put a peppermint cream in his coat pocket on a Tuesday morning with a note that said, "Good job on the towel corners." I took the garage with a bench that made broken things leave better. Daniel stood at the pegboard one evening and traced the hammer outline with his finger. "You turn this exile into a workshop," he said. "You turn this insult into hands." I nodded. It was always a room. It just needed a job. He slipped once more. Stress and pride make men forget what they've learned. A neighbor texted him to complain about kids on scooters and he wrote "No scooters" on a scrap of paper and taped it to the door. I walked over, took it down, and replaced it with a chalk arrow on the driveway that curved into a circle around a stack of books with a note. Finish a lap, pick a page. The kids squealed. The neighbor laughed. Daniel looked at the scrap in his hand and put it in the trash without a speech. He watched the chalk track fill and fade, and I watched him understand that motion is not mess when it knows where it's going. I put one more weight where it couldn't be moved. The budget. Lighthouse, my little service, kept a separate account. The House Commons got its own jar. We put $5 from every Saturday empanada tray into that jar. We used it to buy a space heater for the den and a better light for the fix-it bench and 2 new copies of Charlotte's Web because our first one looked like it had been loved by 100 hands. Daniel started slipping 5s and 10s into the jar when he got paid and never said a word. I saw it because I track things. I didn't thank him out loud. I wrote light bulb fund on the jar and drew a smiley face with square teeth so he would know I saw him without making him blush. I secured the rooms with paper so that when I am gone, the habits will not vanish with my breath. The nonprofit charter named 3 coordinators. Me, Kira, and Mrs. Hahn. The binder listed 2 successors for every job. The life estate filing sat where law keeps it. The 1-page co-occupancy agreement stayed on the inside of the pantry door with a strip of blue tape that matched the paint. Amal nodded when he saw all of it. You've turned space into governance, he said. Cities should call you. I didn't need a city. I needed my house to be safe from being turned into a floor plan without me. When spring came, the school asked for volunteers to set up for the reading fair. Daniel signed up. He showed up with a ladder and a staple gun and no plan. He looked at the gym like a man facing a hurricane of paper stars. I walked in with a fix-it bin and a list. You take the left wall, I said. I'll take the right. Hang the banner first. Low enough for photos. He did. He kept his voice low. He held the ladder when Tyler climbed. He learned to read a room the way he'd learned to read the whiteboard. Not as a place to conquer but as a place to serve. That night he stood in our living room, hands in his pockets, and said, I almost ruined this house. Not loud. Just true. I said, you almost did. He nodded. Thank you for not letting me. I said, thank you for learning. We held that small exchange like a warm mug between us. No more words. We had work in the morning. He tried one last time to claim a square I wouldn't let him have. Maybe we should move the sewing back to the garage, he suggested gently, like he was asking about the weather. The cart, it's always there. The cart has a job, I said. It turns money into hems and hems into smiles. It stays. He looked at the machine, then at the pants folded on the bench. He nodded. You're right. He picked up a pair of his own slacks. Can you show me how to fix this hem? I did. He pricked his finger once and swore under his breath, then laughed at himself. He wore those slacks to work with a pride that had nothing to do with status and everything to do with thread. By summer, the rooms knew me so well they answered before I spoke. The living room lamp clicked on at 5 for story. The den kettle sang at 7 for stretch. The dining room hosted a complicated puzzle of math books and scissors and lasagna pans as if it had grown extra arms. The garage bench smelled like oil and wood and the last USB fan we fixed for a neighbor who worked nights. The kitchen said yes to anyone who walked in with hands. The hallway told time. The laundry room waited without yelling. The binder stayed open to the page it needed. Every room he had belonged to me now in the only way that matters. Not title, not deed, but duty. The house moved when I moved. Distilled when I stilled. Remembered me. And Daniel did too. He stopped introducing me as Mom when people came by for the first time. He started saying, this is the one who keeps the house up. He told a man from the utility company, check with her, and pointed at me. He caught himself mid-sentence one night about space and changed the word to flow. He asked, does this flow? Holding a new shelf against the wall. I said yes. He installed it level. On the anniversary of the night he opened the garage door for his tour and laughed. We sat at the table with the girls and Kira and passed a bowl of cherries. No speeches. No candles. Just a bowl that kept coming back full because hands kept filling it. After dinner I walked the rooms like I do. Not to check for dust. To listen. The living room said we are used. The dining room said we are honest. The den said we show up. The hallway said we remember. The kitchen said we feed. The laundry room said we teach. The garage said we repair. The office, which had finally become an office and not a word, whispered we sign fair paper. I touched the frame of my tiny permit and felt the cool glass. I don't need big certificates. I need small ones that hold. Kira came up beside me and leaned her head on my shoulder. You took over every room, she said, not bitter, just amazed. And somehow I can breathe more. That's how right use feels, I said. It gives space back. Later, after the girls were down, Daniel stood in the doorway of my little bedroom. He knocked on the frame. You busy? He asked. I shook my head. He stepped in, eyes on the quilt, the peppermint bowl, the neat stack of books. I'm sorry, he said, finally putting the words in the room that deserved them. For the garage. For all of it. I thought efficiency was kindness. I thought quiet meant peace. I was wrong. I know, I said. You learned. He swallowed. You took over every room I had. I took back the work, I said. That's different. He smiled, a small right thing. Keep it, he said. Please. I don't need permission. But the asking matters. It means the house can rest a little deeper at night. He backed out, closed the door partway, and left the hallway light on like he did when he was 5 and afraid of the dark. I turned off my lamp and lay under my quilt and listened to the house breathe. He said I took up too much space. He moved me to the garage and called it efficient. I answered by turning rooms into jobs and jobs into law and law into habits and habits into home. I took over every room he had, not with clutter, not with noise, but with uses he could not argue and a permanence he could not undo. That's justice you can touch with your hand on a door frame. It doesn't shout. It doesn't slam. It stands where it belongs and holds. When I first rolled my suitcase into the garage, the air smelled like fertilizer and forgotten paint. The concrete was cold under my slippers. I set my lamp on an upturned crate and told myself I could make it work. I didn't know then that I would not just make it work, I would make it mine. That garage was supposed to be a corner, a compromise, a way to tuck me out of the way so the real house could hum without me. But I learned something under those rafters. People can shrink your square footage, but they can't touch your reach unless you hand it to them. I didn't hand mine over. I learned the studs. I learned the outlets. I learned where the light fell in the afternoon. And then when the time came, I walked back into every room my son thought was his alone and left something of me there that couldn't be moved without leaving a mark. I think about the rooms now not as possessions but as proofs. The dining room with the big table we'd salvaged from the church hall. It still smells faintly of yeast and paper from taxes, a reminder that numbers and meals both hold families together. The living room with its reading lamp and threadbare rug is still warm from the weight of neighbors leaning in to hear a story. The den still hums in the morning, the kettle singing for whoever shows up to stretch and talk. Even the hallway, quiet and plain, holds the little shelf we leveled together, books leaning on each other like they know they're not alone. These aren't trophies. They're anchors. They keep this house upright in ways a blueprint can't show. And Daniel, he walks differently now. I see it in how he pauses before making plans, how he reads the whiteboard before speaking, how he lingers at the fix-it bench even when nothing's broken. He learned that space isn't about who owns the deed, it's about who holds the care. That was the lesson I wanted him to find, not as a lecture but as a weight he could pick up and feel for himself. I don't forgive the garage. Not entirely. Forgiveness, like space, has to be earned, and some walls will always remember what they've been asked to hold. But I've made peace with it. The garage taught me that exile can be a workshop, that insult can be raw material. It gave me the quiet I needed to design a way back in. The girls will remember it differently. They'll remember soup cooling on the counter while tools clinked in the garage. They'll remember reading under the living room lamp, the way voices wrapped the room like a quilt. They'll remember that Grandma had a key to every room, not because she demanded it but because every room needed her. And when they have houses of their own, I hope they remember to give each room a job, to let care fill the corners, to never push someone out of the way when they could pull them closer. Sometimes late at night I walk the house alone. My feet know the soft spots in the floor. My hands know which door handles stick in the summer. I pause in each doorway and listen the way you listen for a kettle to boil. The rooms answer. Not in words but in the steady hum of things being used and loved. That's the sound of justice here, not gavel or applause, but the quiet endurance of a home that has been set right. And maybe that's the real victory. Not that I took over every room, but that every room now holds someone better than it did before. Daniel isn't the same man who opened the garage door with a smirk. He's a man who carries his share, who mends hems, who knows the value of a level shelf. He's a man who learned that space isn't a gift you give someone. It's a responsibility you share. The life estate papers are in the binder just where they should be. The nonprofit charter is filed. The schedule is on the fridge. And the habits, those are in the bones of the house now, in the people who move through it. Even if I left tomorrow, they'd go on without me, which is the only kind of permanence that matters. He thought he was giving me the smallest space possible. I gave him the biggest lesson he could carry. And in the end, that's the weight that will stay with him, long after the garage is just another room with tools and stories in the corners. I close my bedroom door at night, not to keep anyone out, but to hold the quiet in. I breathe. I sleep. I dream of houses that never have to be reclaimed because no one forgot who they were built for in the first place. And when the morning comes, I open the door and walk into every room I have, every room I've made mine, and I start the day knowing that I didn't just take up space. I filled it.